restaurants and gyms. That could happen as early as tomorrow, possibly going into effect in time for the weekend. Now, the Ford government has been feeling the heat from small businesses angry that larger venues with massive crowds are allowed to open first, and is giving ammunition to the opposition parties. Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca saying, we've seen this before when the province allowed big box stores to open but kept small businesses closed down.
This is not the first time during this pandemic where there's been a real split in how different sectors of the economy have been treated, which, I think has made a tough situation even worse.
NDP leader Andrea Horwath says the premier showed similar stubbornness with proof of vaccination.
And Ford had to be dragged kicking and screaming to do the right thing.
Now, the government is encouraged by Ontario's high vaccination rate and the relative stability of new COVID cases 5 weeks after students return to school. I'm Kevin Meisner.
City News Time, 9:03. A member of the Conservative Party of Canada National Council has been suspended now after spearheading an effort to trigger an early review of Erin O'Toole's leadership. Bert Chen sat as a representative from Ontario when he started an online petition to collect signatures in hopes the council would hold a referendum before 2023. Chen says members feel O'Toole has betrayed the party values when it comes to spending and a consumer carbon price on fuel. Party President Rob Batherson says the up to 60-day suspension follows complaints it received about Chen's conduct, which will be investigated. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Inform your opinions.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
All right, let's launch right into it. We have a lot of territory to cover between now and noon on the Rob Snow Show on City News. So much happening. 25 days straight. 25 days in a row. No light rail. And there won't be a judicial inquiry into the light rail affair. The Ottawa Auditor General is going to look into that instead. Chaos and mayhem erupt at the City Council meeting yesterday. Allegations of a light rail cover-up. Mayor Watson accused of silencing women, turning off their microphones, stifling debate, crushing municipal democracy as we know it. We'll get into all of that and more this morning. We're going to focus on the light rail affair again, how we got here, what went wrong, what we should be doing, what we are going to do. We're going to actually take some time, take a little look into the rearview mirror, and then hop into the DeLorean a little bit. I'm going to be joined coming up here shortly by former Ottawa Mayor Larry O'Brien. It was during his term as mayor that the city hit the so-called reset button on light rail. And it wasn't just Mayor O'Brien who did that. Many members of the City Council of the day were along for the ride on hitting the reset button, including well-known left-wing councillors like Alex Cullen. He wanted to hit the reset button too. Yeah, you did, Alex. You know you did. And that's what the city did. There was an earlier plan for light rail in the city of Ottawa that would have been up and running years ago. So-called north-south line of the Bob Shirelli years. And that was torn up, ripped up, funding agreements canceled, lawsuits launched, lawsuits settled, the whole thing, and we came up with a brand new plan for the line we have now. The Confederation line with the tunnel under the downtown core, the Confederation line that hasn't been running for 25 days and really hasn't served us very well for the last 2 years. So we're going to ask Larry about all of this and whether he has any regrets about how things have turned out. That's coming up in just a few minutes' time. Then it's Ontario politics this week with our pair of trusty legal political analysts coming up right after the 9:30 news. Whole lot happening at Queen's Park and in Ontario politics. There's a new survey out this morning. It's from Angus Reid, and it's the approval ratings of all the premiers. And you look at the Doug Ford trip, and it's pretty much a round trip. Angus Reid has been tracking this, Doug Ford's approval ratings, going back to just a few months after he was elected, 2018. And Ford's approval rating, December of that year, was sitting at around 42%, and then it started sinking following the government's budget. Down, 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 down. And it bottomed out at 31%. Approval rating for Doug Ford, 31% in April of 2020. When the world changed and the COVID-19 pandemic was just beginning, and by May of 2020, Ford's approval rating shot all the way up to 69%. Okay? From 31% all the way up to 69% in about 4 months. And that's where it topped out, and it's been falling ever since. It's 69, 55, 50, to where it is now, about 35, 36%. The last number that Angus Reid gives is 36% approval rating for Doug Ford. And that gives Doug Ford the third lowest approval rating among the premiers. Jason Kenney in Alberta has the worst approval rating of them all at 22%. Brutal. Gertson is at 35%, basically tied with Doug Ford. That's the guy who took over from Pallister as Premier of Manitoba. So he inherited a mess. It's not, is it his mess? He inherited Pallister's mess. It's a three-way tie for the highest approval ratings. They all have 56%. It's Fury in Newfoundland, Horgan in British Columbia, and Legault in Quebec. They're the most popular premiers in the country. But I would say, and this is the case that I'll make, and I'll be interested in hearing what our analysts have to say this morning. So Doug Ford has an approval rating of 36%. I still think he's in a good place, just given who he's running against. Okay, for the New Democrats, it's going to be Andrea Horwath's fourth try at it. And you would think if she was going to, and she would have won last time, when the Liberals are so deeply unpopular, the throw the bums out election, that if the NDP couldn't win, then it's never going to win. And then the Liberal leader, Mr. Del Duca, and I've had him on many times, very impressive guy, apparently a great organizer, but he has such a steep hill to climb. And he's kind of like dragging behind him this anchor of 15 years of Liberal government and all of those bad decisions made by Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty. And the PCs are already running attack ads to that effect. Okay? If you don't know Stephen Del Duca, he's just like Kathleen Wynne. Okay, you remember Kathleen Wynne. You didn't like Kathleen Wynne very much, right? 7 seats. Stephen Del Duca, he was right there during the whole thing. So why would you vote for him? So we're going to get into all of that and more. $10 a day daycare back in the news this week. Reopening Ontario in the news today, with news expected next week. Ontario politics this week come up right after the 9:30 news. Canadian Tire Centre comes back to life tonight with NHL hockey. It's the Battle of Ontario, home opener, Ottawa Senators versus the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'd rather cheer for the Russians than the Leafs. But we'll get all the plot lines on that one with some help from our friends at Sportsnet. Game is on Sportsnet tonight, 7 o'clock. And every morning here on the Rob Snow Show, we do the Talkback Hour. It's an hour of opinion, hour of phone calls, hottest hour of talk radio in town, ladies and gentlemen. Just ask around. And today we're going to right back into this whole business of mandatory vaccination. Vaccine mandates. And our focus is going to be frontline workers, what I would call them essential workers. healthcare workers, and public transit workers. It's all over the news. The Quebec government has caved. It has caved, okay, on mandatory vaccination for healthcare workers. The Legault government has just totally caved. It had been taking this hard line on mandatory vaccines for healthcare workers. You must be fully vaccinated by the end of this week was the deadline. You must be fully vaccinated or you will be suspended with pay. If you're a nurse, we'll take your license away. You're not coming back to work in any of our hospitals, in any of our long-term care homes until you're fully vaccinated, until you can prove it. And the deadline was this week. But it was something like 15,000 healthcare workers not vaccinated. Half of them treat patients on a daily basis, taking care of patients on a daily basis. Like it's 7,500 or so, not fully vaccinated. So the government said yesterday, we're extending it by a month. It caved, okay? It was forced to admit, actually, we can't let these people go or our healthcare system will fall apart. It's pretty bad as it is. It will be even worse if we have to let go 15,000 healthcare workers. So much for that. Now, meantime, here in Ottawa, it was 1 week ago today on this program, The Rob Snow Show, that the head of the ATU Local 279 Amalgamated Transit Union told me, and this came up at the City Council meeting yesterday, told me there might be as many as 500 OC Transpo workers that aren't vaccinated and have no intention of being vaccinated anytime soon. The union has filed a grievance with the city on this policy. And look, the transit system, the state it's in, already short-staffed. And I don't think OC Transpo is really in any position to go without hundreds of mechanics and hundreds of bus operators right now. So I'm going to ask you during the talkback hour, what should government be doing with these mandatory vaccination policies for these kinds of workers? Frontline essential healthcare workers, frontline essential transit workers. Should it be sticking to this hard line? No jab, no job. Or when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to public transit, do you think it might be time to think about a plan B? We have grade A stuff for you this morning. Rob Snow Show on City News.
The food cupboard started about 25 years ago. Again, it was a very small operation in the basement of a church. And we have been expanding to the point where we needed to have a new facility. So in discussion with the city of Ottawa, and Jan Harder, the local representative here, we came to this location, which is about 2,000 square feet, located in the Walter Baker Center. We've been here for about 2 years, and it is much better. It gives us a much broader opportunity to serve our clients better. It's a fairly affluent community in Barrhaven, so you wouldn't think that people would really need to have a food bank or a food cupboard. But people sometimes have a temporary loss of their job, maybe new immigrants or refugees to the community. Maybe there's been an injury in the family or something like a pandemic that causes people to run short of food during their monthly requirements. So we offer any clients who come and live in our catchment area the opportunity to pick up an order of food every 3 or 4 weeks. The need varies from time to time. We have expanded our offering to include quite a few perishables, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, vegetables, fruit. But people People, I think, know that we need cans of beans and stuff as well, too. One thing that we're consistently short of sometimes is personal hygiene products. You go to the grocery store, you buy your toothpaste and you buy your deodorant and shampoo there. People don't automatically think that to donate those kinds of things to a food cupboard. So we end up buying quite a few of those things from time to time. The pandemic has affected us like it has everybody. Initially, we had to stop the grocery store food donations so that we didn't have any risk of contamination and to have a significant number of volunteer work to be done in our facility. We have a storefront, so it's like a mini grocery store where you take a cart and you go around and pick out the things that you want. That doesn't work during the pandemic to maintain social distancing and so on. So what we have now is our clients can come in one at a time, they make an appointment, they stand behind a line, and they direct our volunteer to, I'd like Kellogg's cornflakes rather than Harvest Crunch, to pick the food that they would like off the shelves according to the allocation, depending on the size of their family. And then they take it out, load it into their vehicle or whatever, bring back the cart, we disinfect everything, and prepare for the next client. We are very blessed here in Barrhaven. We're a totally volunteer organization. So if you give a dollar to us, it goes to purchasing food or to provide some service to our clients.
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
And 1310 AM.
It is always so great to have our next guest on the Rob Snow Show here on City News. Former Ottawa Mayor Larry O'Brien. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning, Rob. It's so nice to be back and talking to you and your listeners.
It's great to hear from you. I hope you're well these days. Hope you're keeping well.
Yeah, I'm keeping a low
days.
profile. I had way too much profile when I was mayor, so I've gone very low profile.
Well, that's okay.
And
That's
I'm enjoying
okay.
life.
That's good. I'm glad to hear you're enjoying your life. It's well deserved. Look, 25 days, the people of Ottawa have not had access to their light rail system. How does that make you feel as former mayor of Ottawa?
I think this is just a plain disaster in so many different ways. And I, like you, am trying to figure out, what's the cause and what happened, and how did we get from pressing the reset button, as you so nicely said yesterday, to today, where we have a system that just simply doesn't work. And I don't know if it's a design, it's the quality of the material delivered, whether it's the competence of the maintenance. It's really, I think you hit the nail on the head. We need to dig deep in this and try and not necessarily to point blame, but to find a solution, because I won this election. I won the election in 2006 based on three things: taxes, trash, and transit. And the transit plan that the former mayor had in place, I really didn't agree with, because it was at surface, it was at grade, and so we pressed the reset button, and ultimately came up with a tunnel design.
It was described as a milk run. It was described as a milk run, and you did have a report done that said it would fail. It would fail at grade. Right?
It would fail, yeah.
Congestion would be too bad. The trip would take too long, and
it might work fine in Europe when they don't have snow. But has anybody lived in Ottawa in February, and you have cars, careening off the road and smashing into a light rail car? I mean, it was a disaster. And people will only take mass transit if it's faster and more reliable than any other form of transit. And in my conclusion at that time was that at grade wasn't going to give you a reliable and faster form of transportation. I mean, people are looking for that. Right. And if that's not the baseline of a system, it's not going to work. And now, tragically, even with the changes, it seems we're back in that position where it's not reliable, and it's not something that's faster, obviously. Right. It's not even working. And so I think this is just, it really says that everything we've spent, the billions of dollars we've spent, has been kind of a waste unless we fix this. Because I always looked at this as a 100-year decision. What will people say in 100 years? And I sure as heck hope that one way or another, the city of Ottawa will figure out how to get this right and make this right.
Right.
Because
so
it's disgusting.
Right. So you're upset at the performance of it right now, as I think most people in the city are right now. But it sounds like you don't really regret hitting the reset button, though. You don't. You still think that was the right decision to do at the time.
Yeah, at the time, I think absolutely, and also to focus on the core of the system. I agree with you completely, Rob. It was the right decision. I stand behind that. But more importantly, you had to get the core of the city right. If the core of the city wasn't right, and at that time the core of the city was where everybody was going. Now, post-COVID, I'm not sure if we have the same situation or not, but the core of the city was where everyone was going. So it had to be reliable through the middle of the city. And that's why we went to a tunnel. And so and now the question is, how did this, one question I guess everyone is asking is, how did this happen? And I heard you use the horrible words corruption yesterday.
Yeah.
And I thought about that last night.
Okay.
And I can honestly tell you, I think everyone in council that I have ever known is an honest person. And but they've been isolated from the decision. The council itself has been isolated from the decision-making process. Like we approved the concept of going for a tunnel during my term, and then it was up to the next council led by Jim Watson, and I've known Jim for many years, and to a fault, he's an honest man. These are not people who are, maybe they take little things like lunches or dinners or something like that, or tickets to something, but they're not corrupt in the way that we have seen corruption through the Siemens projects and other projects where they actually systemize the corruption of municipalities in Europe and in the U.S. That doesn't happen in Canada because we have a weak mayor situation, and the bureaucracy can isolate the decision making from the council. They can just come with recommendations, and that's why everything's a secret. I mean, the poor councillors don't know what's in the contract.
Right. Yesterday, in the end, they didn't have a vote on a judicial inquiry, and the mayor made some maneuvers, and they opted for this Auditor General investigation instead. What kind of inquiry would you like to have seen done? Would you have supported a judicial inquiry, for example?
No, I think the Ontario AG should go after it. I agree with one of the MPPs. I think if in the end we can't figure out how this happened, then I think the Ontario Auditor General should call call for an inquiry and look at what happened, and they would have the power to go into the bureaucracy, and that's where the problem is. You can't see through that bureaucracy. I remember, and I won't name names, but I remember one time when I was first mayor, and I was fighting the unions, and I was trying to sort my way through in the early days of being mayor, and a very high-ranking bureaucrat came to me and said, "Larry, why are you fighting us? There's 16,000 of us and only one of you." And I remember that just stayed with me. I mean, they can put up a wall, between the politicians and the bureaucrats. Like nobody, you just can't imagine unless you're there. And, I think someone's got to be able to look into the bureaucracy, what was behind some of these decisions, because the policy decision could be valid, but the implementation could be messed up. And I'm not going to say it, but if there is any corruption, the place to be looking for it would be in the bureaucratic process.
Okay.
Larry, one government can look into another government. We are creatures of the province. Okay. And that's where I'd look for it.
All right. Former Ottawa Mayor Larry O'Brien is with me, and before he was mayor, he's a very successful entrepreneur with a long and distinguished career in business in the community. So, Larry O'Brien, the businessman, how would you deal with a company like RTG or Alstom, companies that it would appear to any clear-headed person in Ottawa hasn't been delivering the goods? They haven't been delivering the goods. So how would you, from a business perspective, deal with companies like that?
Well, yeah, it's tough because post signing of the contract, everything is based on contract law, right? Yeah. So you have to look at the contract, and that is where the devil is in the details of the contract. I would suspect that these companies are living to the letter of their contract, and they just outwitted the purchasing department or the contracts management department in the city. That's the only thing I can think of, and I would want to look into the contract and see if there's any leverage that the city can put back. There's a reason that I think that the politicians here are not pushing back, because they've probably been given a briefing that these companies are all working within the letter of the law. They're all just pointing to different clauses and saying, not my fault. No. This is what you signed on to. So if there was anything that you could blame, if you needed to blame, it would be the innocence or the naivety or maybe even the incompetence of the actual procurement process that went on, where they were just outfoxed. I mean, I was in contracts management for 20 years, and I know the devil is in the detail. So I'd want to go back to that contract and really review it, because in every contract, it's almost an arm wrestling game. And the contract is they've got to go back and they've got to see if there's anything that they can really leverage. You can post blame or point to the blame as to why, but then you've got to work that contract to your advantage. And that's the only options you really have, I think, at this point. Okay. Contract, we're a country of laws, and contract laws are very important in the execution of work and of programs and of projects of enterprise. Yeah. So we have to go back and we have to just...
Let me ask you, just to wrap up here, Larry, I've always known you to be, you're always so optimistic. Even during your darkest days, you always manage to come off as so optimistic. Are you still optimistic that in the end, after it's all built out, it will actually serve the city well? Light rail.
Up until COVID, I would have said that the yes, but there's two things that have happened recently. Well, one, COVID, where people are starting to work from home and enjoying it. And second of all, recently there was this discussion that, the federal government is not dealing well with a 75-25% rule that was put in place by Trudeau, where 75% of the national capital employees had to work in Ottawa and 25% in Gatineau. I think the real number is 83%. So there's more people working in downtown Ottawa than should be. They don't have to go to Gatineau. They can go anywhere in the country now because people can work from home. So I am not sure. I think, one, we got a problem. The downtown is going to get badly hurt. We have an opportunity then, because we can renovate, we can reconfigure our downtown. We're going to have lots of extra office space downtown, and what are we going to do with it? We're going to have lots of extra parking spaces downtown. What are we going to do with it? So on one hand, it's a massive, I think it's a problem, and I'm not as optimistic as I once was. On the other hand, it's a huge opportunity to rebuild the downtown of Ottawa. And I don't hear anyone talking about that. I don't hear any of our municipal politicians talking about that. And I think that's going to be the number one issue that they're going to be facing over the next 20 to 30 years. What are we going to do with downtown? What are we going to do? Like the walking traffic in downtown Ottawa is 80% or more or less than it was before the COVID. Right. The whole world has gone upside down as a result of COVID. So that's called the Black Swan. When we made the decision to put light rail in, nobody anticipated COVID. Yeah. All right. And now so the answer is no, I'm not as optimistic as I once was.
I have to wrap it up there. Look, great to hear your voice. Stay well.
You stay well too, Rob.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Larry O'Brien, former mayor of Ottawa. News next, and then Ontario politics this week on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
It doesn't take long to make a difference. It only takes an hour. An hour to give with Sarah Pratt.
A program dedicated to causes and...
FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 14th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 16 degrees. And here's what's making news this hour. Former Ottawa Mayor Larry O'Brien weighing in this morning on City News, calling the light rail system in our city complete disaster. Until this is fixed, Larry O'Brien says it's been a waste of money. And as for a review of the whole LRT, O'Brien says the Auditor General for the province may be the best person to review the contract. Right now, the city auditor has been taxed with that job. A series of extortion incidents has led to charges in Ottawa. Police say a dating scam was luring men to the West End on the pretense of meeting a woman. When the victim arrived at a specified location, they were intimidated and threatened to be exposed with communicating with an underage girl. 2 Ottawa men, aged 23 and 24, right now facing charges. A third is wanted. Police are asking for those who were victims to come forward. I'll have more details for you coming up at 10 o'clock on that story. Good seats are left for the season opener. The Ottawa Senators hosting the Maple Leafs. Now, more people than expected for the home opener as a full crowd is now allowed at Canadian Tire Centre. The Sens host the Leafs tonight at 7 o'clock. City News Time, 9:34. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM and 1310 AM.
Just before we jump into Ontario politics this week, I want to bring you up to date on some stuff that's happening on Twitter right now. There was chaos and mayhem at the City Council meeting yesterday when it came time to have a vote on Councillor McKenney's motion about calling a judicial inquiry. They never did have a vote on calling a judicial inquiry into the light rail affair because there was a quote-unquote replacement motion that had obviously all been pre-planned, and it was presented by Councillor Glenn Gower to have the Ottawa Auditor General look into this. It's all very procedural, but at one point in the discussion yesterday, in the debate and the yelling and the eyeball rolling, the mayor cut off the microphone of Councillor Diane Deans. And this has really set some people off. The mayor is accused, this is a very progressive mayor, accused of silencing women, okay? So Jim Watson has just apologized by way of his Twitter account for what happened. He said earlier today, this is a minute ago on his Twitter account, quote, "Earlier today I wrote to Councillor Deans to apologize for her microphone being cut off while in the midst of an important debate yesterday. It was the wrong call on my part and I take full responsibility." So if you weren't watching that City Council meeting, it kind of descended into bedlam. Bedlam. Roll tape, David. This is what it sounds like.
Just roll.
Chair, I challenge your ruling.
Okay, challenge there. Shall the chair be sustained? So, Ms. Deputy Clerk, if you would explain the voting process for sustaining the chair.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we received a challenge to your ruling. We will now vote immediately on the whether the chair shall be sustained. If you wish to sustain the mayor's ruling, you vote yes.
Just what is the ruling? I'm sorry, Madam Clerk. I don't know what the mayor has ruled.
I ruled that this is a replacement motion, and the chair's been challenged on that. So we're going to, if you support my ruling, you vote yes. If you don't support it, you vote no. Yeas and nays.
Can we hear from the clerk?
We're in the midst of a vote right now. Go ahead.
Why do we have a clerk? Why do we have a clerk? We'd like to know whether our
And why do we even have a clerk, Councillor McKenny says, right?
Like, are we just going to vote on something none of us even really understand? Like, Councillor Deans took the time to look it up, but nobody around this table knows the bylaw. Why don't we just ask the clerk for his opinion? Mr. Mayor, the mayor has ruled on this matter, so there is no opportunity for the clerk's office to weigh in.
The question was asked before the ruling.
Question was asked to the city clerk prior to the mayor intervening. I have every right as a member of this council to ask the city clerk to pronounce on this issue. Is it a reasonable substitution or...
All right, so we're going to
That's
the
where he
vote
cut her
now.
off.
If you support
He cut
my
her right
ruling, you
off.
vote yes. If you don't,
What a
you
joke.
vote no.
Did you cut Diane Dean off? Yeah, really, cutting women off. I love it. Oh, nice. Ways and nays have been called.
All right. Cutting women off. I love it, Councillor McKinney says. So again, Mayor Watson is apologizing through his social media channel on Twitter to Councillor Deans for cutting her microphone off. Quote, in the midst of an important debate, it was the wrong call on my part, and I take full responsibility. From Mayor Watson. So, 25 days and no light rail, and that's the camaraderie around our city council table or our city council Zoom call. Let's turn our attention to provincial affairs now. Ontario politics this week. We're just trying to connect with Lindsay Maskell, who is our regular Liberal strategist, former advisor to Dalton McGuinty. She'll join us shortly, I believe. Alex Chreston joins us this week, senior consultant at Crestview Strategies, former senior aide to PC leaders John Tory and Tim Hudak. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. You're missing all the fun with Ottawa municipal politics.
I know. You know, I worked at Toronto City Hall for a little bit, also for Mayor Tory. And you know what? It's always fireworks at City Hall, more so than you get at Queen's Park.
Well, it's the government that's closest to the people, right? And
right.
We've got a pretty core. I imagine, the subways in Toronto not running for 25 days. No GO trains for 25 days or something like that, right?
There'd be riots.
There would be questions, certainly. So, look, let's get into kind of the early election odds. I mean, it's hard to, the unofficial campaign is underway now, you would agree, Alex, right? The ads are running and everything. So we have a new survey from the Angus Reid Institute, and it says that since June, all but one premier who was in power at that time has seen their respective levels of approval decline. The lone exception is Ontario's Doug Ford, who's kind of holding steady at around 36%. 36% support. But you have to think that the Liberals and the New Democrats are going to be kind of swimming in the same pool. They'll be fighting over the same kind of anti-Ford Nation voters. So 8 months from Election Day in Ontario, how do you like Doug Ford's chances right now?
Yeah, look, I think that Doug Ford's chances are pretty good where he is. I think, people may agree or disagree with everything that he's done through the pandemic, but generally, public opinion, people think that he's done at least a fairly decent job, and you can see that with with where Ontario is in terms of COVID numbers going down, businesses reopening. Andrea Horwath has been running for premier for 10 years. That gives her a bit of an advantage, but it also shows that maybe there's a bit of a ceiling for her support. And Stephen Del Duca, even though he's a cabinet minister, he is still relatively unknown, and he's had to introduce himself to Ontarians during a pandemic. And we saw how Erin O'Toole had to struggle with that in the federal election. It's not easy, and it's a tough job to be opposition leader or an opposition leader at the best of times, and to have to be sort of virtually through your Zoom screen. It just doesn't give the same opportunity to get out there. So I think that handicapping the race at this point, I think that things are looking good for the premier.
Yeah. Advantage Ford.
Advantage
right now.
Ford.
Advantage Ford. Yeah, and it's very interesting. Again, 8 months out from the actual election date, the progressive conservatives are not wasting any time. They're not going to let Stephen Del Duca introduce himself. They're going to introduce Stephen Del Duca to Ontarians. On behalf of the Progressive Conservative Party, meet Stephen Del Duca. This is what the ad sounds like.
Remember life under Kathleen Wynne?
Oh.
Stephen Del Duca wants to take us back. He was Wynn's right-hand man when they sent your hydro bill skyrocketing. Sold Hydro One, all while Liberal insiders got rich. He sat in cabinet while good-paying jobs fled the province. Remained idle while creating only 611 new long-term care beds, leaving our most vulnerable unprepared for the pandemic. Ontario crumbled under Kathleen Wynne and Stephen Del Duca. Let's not go back. Authorized by the CFO for the Ontario PC Party.
Like, all that's missing is the Halloween screams in the background. But what do you think of that as a strategy? Like, define your opponent before your opponent can define themselves.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that this is a sort of a classic play here that you saw. It worked really well for Stephen Harper with Stephen Dion and Michael Ignatieff.
Yeah.
I think that Kathleen Wynne, saw the Liberal Party reduced to 6-7 seats in the legislature.
Yeah.
As much as they can tie Stephen Del Duca to the legacy of Kathleen Wynne. That's the play here.
Yeah, so they must have some polling or have done some focus groups or something that would show people really don't know Stephen Del Duca, but maybe if they mention the name Kathleen Wynne, that really registers, and maybe not in a good way. So,
well, it's the biggest part of his resume, right? That he was a cabinet minister under Kathleen Wynne.
Yeah.
So if that's both his biggest strength is that he was a cabinet minister. Unfortunately, for him, it's also his biggest weakness.
Okay. So look, we'll come back. We'll connect with Lindsay, we hope, and we'll get into some of the other issues in Ontario politics this week. This is the Rob Snow Show, and this is City News.
Oh, according to research, 82% of people remember radio ads. That means that 82% of you listening right now will remember that this is an ad for ZipRecruiter.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online, and the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on-hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Ontario politics this week. Unfortunately, having trouble with connecting with Lindsay this week, but we do have Alex Chreston from Crestview Strategy. senior consultant there. The $10 daycare deal. Ontario is one of 3 provinces, the other 2 being Alberta and New Brunswick, Alex, that have yet to sign on to the federal government's $10 a day childcare deal. Now, this week, a PC party official, not a government official, but a party official, said it's about money. We're interested, but the federal government's not offering enough money. We want a better deal. What are the chances of a breakthrough on this, do you think?
I think there's going to be a deal here at some point. Obviously, the province is going to try and get as much out of it as possible. And for now, the timing's in their court to some degree. As we get closer to the election, they're going to have to make a deal because this is something that's popular with parents, and I don't think that Doug Ford's going to want to leave a deal sitting on the table when he goes to the polls.
Right. Yeah, that it's not just about getting the most money from the federal government, but it's about getting maximum political benefit when the agreement is actually announced, right? He'll want to be able to do a victory lap about this. You would.
Oh
think.
yeah, certainly,
right.
Certainly, but even more than doing a victory lap on it, I think it would demonstrate that he's sort of a practical, pragmatic leader, as opposed to some people wanting to paint him as an ideologue. I think nothing could be further from the truth, but it would give such a gift to the opposition if they were to leave something like this sitting on the table.
Yeah, that's something else I wanted to ask you about. Is let's work from the assumption that a deal is eventually announced. What sort of shift is that? Say, bigger picture, to have a conservative government embracing this kind of child care model, a $10 a day child care model. It's it would be a pretty big shift if you ask me. But
but we've seen this kind of thing happen before, and I would say that the current conservative government is not, it's not the Mike Harris conservative government. This is a premier who is not driven by ideology, but is driven by practical sort of populist politics, and when he says he's that kind of the old slogan for the people.
Right.
If this is what the people want, I think that they don't want to be in a situation where the opposition has that kind of can campaign on this, right?
Right.
If the opposition can campaign on this, that's not good, right? It at least takes the issue off the table for an election.
Yeah, and you already have Del Duca saying, I've already announced I would do this in a heartbeat, right? So it kind of it cuts that kind of attack off. I would have done it sooner or something. It wouldn't really matter. It's done. It's done. So it kind of neuters the attack.
It's going to take a long time to set this up anyway. So
right. Yeah, it's a 5-year plan, right? It's a 5-year plan. So
no one who actually has kids right now would actually even benefit from it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, we'll see what happens with it. Reopening Ontario. Reports this morning suggest that the Ontario government is going to announce more measures, lifting more measures for COVID-19 public health restrictions, including ending capacity limits in all locations where proof of vaccination requirements are in place, restaurants, bars, and gyms. Now, this comes just a couple of days after a lot of business organizations, CFIB comes to mind, and small business owners were just outraged. I mean, seething mad about the government's decision to end capacity limits for large sporting events. It's opening night for the Ottawa Senators tonight here in Ottawa. We could have 18,500 at Canadian Tire Centre. But a sports bar 5 minutes down the road from Canadian Tire Centre is stuck at 50% capacity. So I do wonder how much damage has been done to this I'm in it for the little guy brand that Doug Ford has built over the years. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think that this would not be, I think the pandemic has thrown a lot of people for a loop, and it's not the government that that I think that they expected to be running when they first got elected.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to play the card you're dealt. But I think it makes sense. Look, we've got the evidence shows that vaccinated people can gather without any major harm. I think whether it's restaurants, bars, gyms, or even one thing that I haven't heard much about, but I'd like to see in this as well is sort of general admission, small concert venues as well, because it's another group that's really been struggling. But I think how much damage has been done, I think people are pretty understanding that the things have had to be done.
They're going to go after him and after him hard for it, though, when it comes to the campaign. The NDP, this is already a theme for the NDP in its attack ads, contrast ads. I'm just going to play the ad here, Alex. Hold on. Yeah, play the ad, Dave. Yeah.
This guy says he's for the little guy. But what happened to that? Every chance he gets, Ford fails your family. When workers need paid sick days, Doug denies them. When local businesses need help, Ford sides with the big box stores instead. And with a crisis in seniors' care, Ford protects owners' profits instead of protecting the people who live there. For the little guy, please. Doug Ford, here for his buddies, not for you. A message from Ontario's NDP.
It's a good ad. It's a good ad. It's sharp. It hits. It's right on message. It's a really good ad. We'll see if it works. But what do you think? I mean, that's going to be a very common refrain from the opposition. Doug Ford is not in it for the little guy. Doug Ford's in it for whoever, the big guys. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think to some extent there's always going to be criticism when the government has been so involved in everybody's day-to-day lives, and I think this is exactly an example, and the COVID pandemic should be an example of why, when things are good, we shouldn't be electing governments that are too involved in our day-to-day lives. If the government's bad at deciding what you can and can't do with every minute of your life, no kidding. I sort of would expect that, right. and that's why I vote the way I do.
Okay.
And people have to make up their mind on that, but I think that that when it comes down to it, and they look and see, would they rather have had a Conservative government managing things through the pandemic or an NDP government? That's up to the voters, but I would think that things could have been a lot worse.
Okay. I think people are still, the experts and the analysts and the pundits are still trying to figure out what kind of impact the PPC, the People's Party, had on the federal election campaign. It certainly outperformed expectations, I think. Maybe cost the Conservative Party some seats. Do you think that there will be a PPC-like party to emerge during the Ontario election campaign? A party, if Doug Ford is not the ideological Conservative, and you've made that case this morning, would you see a more right of center, more ideologically Conservative party, like a PPC party, emerging at some point over the next 8 months? Or is it too late for that?
There already are a few. There's already a few when there's the Trillium Party, a Libertarian Party, I don't know if the Family Coalition is still around.
Yeah. But something that could get 6 or 7, maybe even 8% support or something.
I think the problem is that there's so much of these movements are tied up in personality.
Okay.
And there's in sort of the game of maverick politics, it's not really a team sport. So as I've been saying for a long time, since Randy Hillier was booted from the PC caucus, that I think that he'll be running for premier in one way or another, but will he have the support of the Roman Babbers and everyone else, or are they all going to be, sort of trying to outdo each other and take their own bit of the limelight? And the more they can, the more they diffuse that amongst several different parties.
Right.
I think there's a movement here, but whether or not that can be turned into a cohesive political party is yet to be seen.
Okay. Hey, thank you for your time this morning.
No problem.
Alex,
Thank you.
yeah, great to hear from you. I hope to have you back soon because it's going to be an interesting 8 months in Ontario politics, that's for sure, as we make our way toward Election Day in June. That's Ontario politics this week. Lindsay sends along her apology. She'll join us next week. This is the Rob Snow Show. The Talk Back Hour is coming up next. We'll talk again about mandatory vaccination and whether some of these governments need to come up with a plan B. 750-1310, this is City News.
Local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 14th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson apologizing to Councillor Diane Deans. As she was making an argument yesterday over procedure and the two motions over which body should investigate the LRT, her mic was cut off. During a media briefing yesterday, the mayor said the associate clerk cut off the mic. This morning on Twitter, Jim Watson says he has written the councillor this morning to apologize for that microphone being cut off in the midst of an important debate. Watson says it was a wrong call and he takes full responsibility. In the end, council voted to have the City Auditor General examine the whole LRT system. Former Mayor Larry O'Brien weighed in this morning on the Rob Snow Show.
I think this is just a plain disaster in so many different ways.
Former Mayor O'Brien thinks the idea from MPP Joel Harden is actually a good one to get to the bottom of this LRT problem.
The Ontario AG should go after it. I agree with one of the MPPs. I think if in the end we can't figure out how this happened, then I think the Ontario Auditor General should call call for an inquiry.
Now, he says the provincial AG has the power to dive into the bureaucracy of that contract. City News Time 10:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Just a slight chance of a shower today and warm again. The high 21 will feel like 26. Some showers this evening, a steady rain overnight, 14 for the low. For today, the high warm 21.
And right now it's 16 degrees in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls. Could the province be moving out of the third step of the pandemic measures? Apparently, that is the plan. And here's City News reporter Kevin Meisner with what we know so far.
The government source is now confirming that the Premier will be meeting with his cabinet as early as tomorrow. And government sources are confirming that Doug Ford will be making an announcement next week on the details and timing of a plan to move beyond Step 3. Now, it is possible he may begin by announcing an increase in capacity for bars, restaurants, and gyms. That could happen as early as tomorrow, possibly going into effect in time for the weekend. Now, the Ford government has been feeling the heat from small businesses angry that larger venues with massive crowds are allowed to open first, and is giving ammunition to the opposition parties. Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca saying, "We've seen this before when the province allowed big box stores to open but kept small businesses closed down."
This is not the first time during this pandemic where there's been a real split in how different sectors of the economy have been treated, which, I think has made a tough situation even worse.
NDP leader Andrea Horwath says the Premier showed similar stubbornness with proof of vaccination.
And Ford had to be dragged kicking and screaming to do the right thing.
Now, the government is encouraged by Ontario's high vaccination rate and the relative stability of new COVID cases 5 weeks after students return to school. I'm Kevin Meisner.
And that rate of COVID cases today numbers 417 in the province. We'll have full details on those numbers coming up at 10:30. A series of extortion incidents has led to charges laid in Ottawa. Police say a dating scam lured men to the West End on the pretense of meeting a woman. When the victim arrived, though, at a specific location, they were intimidated and threatened to be exposed for communicating with an underage girl. Now, 2 Ottawa men, a 24-year-old Omar Ahmed and 23-year-old Abdu Obai Mo Ali Mashik, are facing several charges, including kidnapping and extortion. Now, police continue to search for 24-year-old Guled Jinji. Police do believe there are other victims in this case and encourage those people to come forward. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
All right, I really want to get those phone lines ringing this morning. I love hearing your opinion. And this has been a hot topic in the past. For even more. Is it time to come up with a plan B? Or do you want government to stick to this hard line? 750-1310. 1310. 613-750-1310. Should government still enforce vaccine mandates for what I would call frontline workers, essential workers? Healthcare workers. I'm focusing basically on two groups of workers this morning. Healthcare workers and transit workers, because they're the employees that are in the news. Even if the vaccine mandate means there could be even bigger problems in healthcare. Longer wait times in the emergency room. The backlog of surgical procedures and diagnostic procedures grows longer. Or even if it means that public transit is even worse. Healthcare, public transit, they have big problems already. I'm asking, do you want employers to be sticking to their word and enforce these vaccine mandates, mandatory vaccination, even if it means that public transit suffers even more, even if it means that healthcare suffers even more? That's where I want to start with the Talkback Hour this morning. And we've spent a lot of time talking about light rail, and we've spent a lot of time talking about all the transit problems this week, public transit problems. You know, we covered yesterday, live and in real time, the debate about the judicial inquiry. All of that came to a head at the city council meeting this week. The mayor's apologized for cutting Diane Dean's microphone off during a very heated moment during the council meeting yesterday. We're covering that. It's our top story now at City News. Okay, new lead story here at City News. But this issue is very much alive, very much in the news mix, and it reached somewhat of a climax yesterday with this news out of the province of Quebec. It's sobering news. And I bring it up because the issues in the province of Quebec and its healthcare system, they are not unique by any measure. They are issues that are being confronted every day by every provincial healthcare system from one end of the country to the other, from one side of the Ottawa River to the other. Okay? And yesterday, Quebec, which had taken this very hard line, you don't get the shot, you don't have a job. Yesterday, Quebec blinked in this big game of chicken. The Quebec government blinked first. And that is a serious blow to that government's credibility on this very serious issue. I suspect it's a sign of things to come. Quebec had taken this firm stance, unwavering for weeks and weeks, about its thousands of unvaccinated healthcare workers. We are going to suspend you without pay. If you're a nurse, we're going to take your license away. All of this stuff. A lot of tough talk, day after day after day. Until yesterday. Rubber meet road. Government forced to back down because basically the healthcare system in that province, and it's not the only provincial healthcare system that faces these kinds of pressures, the healthcare system in Quebec cannot function if you suspend 15,000 healthcare workers. The truth is, they need those people working in long-term care and in acute care hospitals and in home care, whether they are vaccinated or not. So Mr. Dubé, yesterday, Quebec's healthcare minister, what did he say? He caved. He caved, okay? He said, okay. We still mean it, but we'll give you another month. We'll give you another month. We'll give you... Now here, seriously, folks, what's going to change in a month? We have been swimming in vaccines since, what would you say, Dave? At least May? It's been pretty easy to get a vaccine since kind of like May, June.
Late May, yeah.
I had my first dose in, I want to say April, I think, April. You were a little later because you're a little younger, right?
June, then 2 weeks later in July.
You had your first dose in June, right? So it's been easy to get vaccinated, pretty much, right?
Very.
You could go, if you haven't been vaccinated, you can go get a shot today. Easy, anywhere, multiple places.
The Hunger Games are long over.
Yeah, long over. You're right. Yeah, good way to put it. So what's going to change in a month on the Quebec side? If the healthcare system couldn't function without those unvaccinated Quebec healthcare employees in October, do you really think the situation is going to be that much different come November? I don't even think the Legault government thinks that. So its credibility on this whole mandatory vaccination issue, like blown to smithereens. It's not unique. We're facing the same thing right here in our city with our public transit system. Do you want the government to stick to this hard line, or is it time to come up with a plan B? That's what I want to know. Let's start. Kempville, City News. Talkback Hour Rob Snow Show. It's Jason up first this morning. Jason, good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice to hear from you, sir. I thank you for your call. Do you want government to stick to its hard line on mandatory vaccination for frontline workers?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Just back off.
Just back off. Maybe come up with a plan B.
Come up with something else.
Come up with something else.
People, if you haven't got it by now, the people don't want it. And you know what? Leave them alone. That's their choice.
Okay. But what about, let's talk a little bit about kind of the environment that we're talking about. Healthcare, right? Where people are sick, frail.
People get over
immunocompromised, right?
Yes.
Right.
You also
don't you think that I'm just playing devil's advocate here? Don't you think like I wouldn't want to be treated by an unvaccinated nurse? I'm sorry, I wouldn't, or an unvaccinated doctor, or if I was in a long-term care home, I would want the personal support worker to be fully vaccinated, wouldn't you, Jason? If you were in there,
not at all.
Not at all.
I wouldn't care.
Wouldn't care. Holy cow. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Jason. Okay. All right. Where are we going here? In Westboro, Helen, good morning. You're on City News.
Good morning.
Yeah. Hi, Helen.
Yes.
Do you want the government to stick to this hard line on mandatory vaccination, the Quebec policy, very similar to the City of Ottawa's own policy? Or is it time to come up with another plan?
We need to drop this. This is absolute insanity what they're doing.
Okay.
These doctors, nurses that haven't been vaccinated, there's a reason that they're not vaccinated. You know, they've been on the front line for almost 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't want to get vaccinated, they've got a reason for it.
Right.
Back off, for God's sake.
Back off. Okay.
They've been the heroes all through this, and now they want to kick them out and just throw them out, to dry? Like, give me a break. Like,
okay.
Get their heads in shape.
Okay, but what about the expectations of patients in the healthcare system? Or what about the expectations of transit users? Don't they have the right to feel safe if they're riding, a bus here in Ottawa, or if they're in a hospital bed here in Ottawa?
You know what, Rob? This has gotten totally out of perspective completely.
Really?
If they're wearing the masks and they're doing the proper things, they've been through this, full all the way. And the thing is, like, maybe in the hotspots, maybe so. But the reason that the nurses and that aren't vaccinated, there's a reason, and let them be, for God's sake.
Let them be. Okay.
Hands off, through all of this. And now, they're just saying, they're going to lose their job. They're even going to lose their license. Give their friggin' heads a shake and pick up some of these politicians. I mean, really.
Well, I think at least in the Quebec example, I think the politicians have now been found out.
Well, look at what that's going to do. Like, they're going to leave them, but they'll extend it another month, and they'll use them, and then they'll kick them out maybe next month. Like, wake up.
Well, if the healthcare system, in the province of Quebec can't get by because it would lose 15,000 healthcare workers in October, it's not going to be, you just don't go out and hire 15,000 healthcare workers in a month.
I know.
Right.
So
okay.
They got to change their plan. They got to back down.
Come up with another plan. Okay, fair enough. All right, Helen.
I'm saying, like, if you're wearing the mask and doing the things like we've come through this, and you know what, Rob? You know what really bothers me the most?
All right.
Is science is about asking questions.
Yes.
And, they're not wanting to hear the size of the nurses or any of the others. They're, all of the announcers and that on the radio shows like Evan Solomon and anyway, all of them, I can't think of.
Whatever, yeah.
They're all, one way. They don't want to hear any of the other side of any of the other people that want to say any of the scientists. They're shut down. The doctors, the nurses, like you're showing, they're losing their jobs. And they're not listening to anybody. And science is about asking questions, but nobody's opening the avenue to the other side. Nobody.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Tomorrow at OC Transpo, the deadline is tomorrow for the workers to show that they're vaccinated. Okay. And David just took a call from an OC Transpo driver who said he's having trouble submitting his paperwork for proof of vaccination because the city's site crashed last night. He tried it again this morning and it didn't work, and he has to have his vaccine proof in by tomorrow. Or he could be out of work. But should he be out of work? That's my question. Given the problems with public transit right now, can we really go without 500 mechanics and bus operators at OC Transpo right now? The public transit system in the city is a dysfunctional mess right now. 750-1310, Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour on City News.
So Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our centre is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the centre. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring, and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our centre, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our centre the Ottawa Good Food Box as well as the Market Mobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years and Market Mobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they're both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighbourhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Do you want government, whether that's a municipal government, a provincial government, a federal government, do you want government to stick to its hard line on mandatory vaccination for frontline government workers, whether that's healthcare workers or transit workers, or is it time to come up with a plan B for these types of frontline positions They refuse to be vaccinated. These people refuse to be vaccinated, but suspending them without pay would mean public services like healthcare and public transit would suffer even more. I think that's the predicament that we're in right now. What is your opinion at 750-1310? Good morning, Dave in the West End. Dave, what do you think?
Well, Rob,
yes,
it was a ridiculous scare tactic that failed miserably.
Okay.
Now, Hull, for instance, half the people in Hull come over here for their medical needs.
Well, no wonder the horror stories that come out of the Hull Hospital. I mean, people sleeping on floors for days, dying, sleeping on floors in the Hull Hospital.
So cut the staff in half and see what happens.
Well, exactly, Dave, yeah.
My goodness.
Sure.
Rob, there's a statistic that we don't get, okay?
Okay.
Okay, the station announced today there's 400 people in Ontario that have the virus today, right? Now, aren't those people in a week or two immune? And isn't their immune system really stronger than the ones that got the needle?
I don't know how one compares to the other.
The news announced.
Well, we can we can report the number of cases on a daily basis.
Yes.
But when it comes to, I guess for me now, I don't really look at cases anymore. I want to know how many people are in the hospital and how many people are in the ICU. What's the pressure on the healthcare system, and can we deal with it?
If we inoculate 400 people a day, and 400 people a day get the virus and recover and have a stronger immune system, that's in 30 days. That's like 25,000 people.
Right. So you're achieving like some kind of natural immunity.
Exactly, the herd thing.
The herd thing. Yeah.
But Rob, if you're not inoculated and you're well, there's nothing wrong with you.
If you're not inoculated and you're not well.
And you're well. No, and you're well.
And you are well. Yeah.
You are well.
Right.
Then what's the problem?
Yeah, but there's always the risk that you can pass it on to somebody who is not well.
Well, there's the risk that even when you're inoculated, that you can pass it on too. You can get it a second time now, apparently.
Right.
So
okay. I guess what I want to get at is, what are we going to do? Okay, clearly the Quebec government it tried to this, I guess if you want to call it a pressure tactic, right?
Well,
you get vaccinated or we're going to fire you, basically was the stance. Trudeau has the same stance. Mayor Watson has the same stance here in Ottawa.
The people that dreamt that up should be fired.
Well... that's why we have elections, right?
Yes.
But never, and maybe some of them after this light rail fiasco will be fired in a year from now.
Imagine laying off one bus driver now. There are people standing at a bus stop watching a bus go by that's full of people not only sitting down but standing up.
Right. And, think about healthcare without thousands and thousands of healthcare workers.
Oh, my.
What's it like at the general's emergency room if you let go hundreds and hundreds of people? Okay, I'm just, I'm kind of spitballing here, wondering what to do, because I want as many, thank you, Dave, I want as many people to be vaccinated as possible. I really do. And generally speaking, I don't have a problem with mandatory vaccination, but I don't want to see the healthcare system just go into its death spiral. And gosh, public transit is a mess, and I don't want to make it an even bigger mess. So these are not easy things to reconcile. How do you reconcile them, Steve? Stephen in Ottawa. Go ahead, Stephen.
Hey, Rob. Great show.
Thank you.
I am a federal employee. I'm a frontline worker, and I have, for personal reasons, chosen not to take the vaccine.
Okay.
And, a lot of my coworkers, they respect me for that, and they don't, some may agree, or a lot of them that I speak with don't agree with, the hard tactics coming from the government. But I can just say when the pandemic first started, I was on annual leave, and I was due back for work May 2020. And this is about the same time that we were seeing really crazy images from Italy, people being wrapped in body bags. And I thought, wow, do I really want to go back to work? I could have easily just said, no, thanks. I'm going to take absence. And I probably still could have got pay, but I chose not to. And for faith reasons, I just said to myself, okay, God, you've brought me this far in life. If it's your will that I succumb to this thing, then that's your will. But I'm just going to trust you. And I've been at work ever since. And there's been times when I've seen people on the street, because I am on the road. And one time I just almost broke down because these people started clapping for me. They had masks on in their car and they see me going around the city doing my job. And I thought, wow, I guess that, it was a choice to go to work. And I know all the science behind, all the rhetoric that's been in the news and everything. And I just think if this mandate really comes to pass and they do lay off 20% of the workforce federally, it's going to be an economic disaster because the supply chain in the U.S. is already having problems. And to lay off 20% of transportation workers or frontline workers, the solution can't be worse than the problem. And I mean, this is just my opinion. So,
all right, Stephen, I thank you for sharing it, sir. Thank you for sharing it. Okay, we've reached halftime on a very busy talkback hour. Right back after the news. This is City News.
The Rob Snow Show, brought to you by Myers Automotive Group. If you like your news with a view.
FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 14th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 16 degrees, and here's what's making news this hour. As the province prepares to ease COVID-related restrictions as soon as next week, COVID cases continue under the 500 level. 417 new cases today in Ontario, along with 3 more deaths. One area of concern might be the number of cases, though, in Eastern Ontario, topping Ottawa for the first time in memory with 55 cases. There are 29 new cases in Ottawa. Also 3 new cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 1 in Renfrew. The case numbers come from over 35,400 tests completed. The number coming back positive, 1.5%. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson has taken responsibility for an incident at council yesterday when Diane Dean's mic was cut off during debate. Watson says on Twitter today he has apologized to the councillor, saying it was the wrong call, and he takes full responsibility. This happened during debate on who should examine the LRT system in Ottawa, plagued with problems almost from day one of launch 2 years ago. Former Mayor Larry O'Brien weighing in on the Rob Snow Show this morning, saying if he were making the call, the Auditor General for the province would be the one leading the investigation. Ottawa Council has voted to have the city AG look into it instead of another suggestion that was a full public inquiry. City News Time, 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back.
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do you want government to stick to a hard line on mandatory vaccination for frontline government workers? And I'm really speaking about healthcare workers and public transit workers, because it's in the news now that the Quebec government was forced to back down. Big climb down yesterday on its hardline stance on mandatory vaccines for healthcare workers, because, well, it's an admission from Dubé, the healthcare minister in Quebec. The healthcare system can't handle getting rid of 15,000 healthcare workers. Lineups just get longer. Here in Ottawa, hundreds of unvaccinated OC Transpo workers. And can OC Transpo really do without hundreds of mechanics and bus operators right now? We talked about this, it was about a week ago. Today, as a matter of fact, that Clint Crabtree, the president of Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 279, was on my show, and we talked about mandatory vaccination. His union has filed a grievance against the City of Ottawa's mandatory vaccination policy for transit workers. How many people are members of ATU Local 279, Mr. Crabtree?
We're talking about 2,400 at OC Transpo, including Paratranspo.
2,400, okay. And what is your sense of how many of the 2,400 are actually fully vaccinated? Do you have any idea? Or
I don't have a specific number, but if you go by the pure numbers that the province has put out, about 75 to 80% have been vaccinated. If you just do those numbers right there, that's a big enough number at OC Transpo that wouldn't be vaccinated members of ATU 279. That will definitely affect the service out there.
Oh, yeah.
Maintenance and bus operators.
Well, I mean, say it's 20%, right? Say it's 20%, you're probably maybe close to 500 members?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So if 500 members were put on leave, you're saying it would affect the operations, the day-to-day operations of OC Transpo?
Absolutely, without a doubt, it would affect the day-to-day operations, especially with the train being down right now, and there's additional service put out, R1 service. I mean, everybody's working and doing overtime to make up for that shortfall of the train. Like, we're short maintenance staff, we're in a pandemic, and the ridership has been lower, so you haven't been hiring as many bus operators, but now you're seeing the ridership start to come back a little bit. So now you have R1 service. So it's not a perfect storm, it's a bad storm.
Okay. That was Clint Crabtree from the Amalgamated Transit Union on the Rob Snow Show last week. Okay. So if you want worse health care, stick to your mandatory vaccination policy. I guess that's a lesson learned in the last 24 hours. And in the last week, if you want even worse public transit, stick to the mandatory vaccination policy. That's one side of it. Is it time to come up with a plan B? That's my question this morning. Christine in Kempville, you are on City News. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Rob. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I wish you had asked Jason if he had been vaccinated. He was calling from Kempville. Just curious, because then I would know where not to shop where he shops.
Okay.
Because I think that everybody needs to be vaccinated.
Right.
It should be mandated. I have it. Okay. I've had my vaccine, not just for me, but for others. And I have a grade 10, a teenager, who just recently came back from school, had a fever, had a cough, and I was just thinking, where did she get, how'd she get it? And I'm panicking, taking her temperature, thinking, oh my God, even though we've all been fully vaccinated, that this is what happens when other people aren't. And it's scary. It's really scary. Yes, there will be some problems, some issues with hospital staffing and services.
Yeah.
But I mean, we've got to take a punch before it can all improve. That's
so you would say to, say, a municipal government or provincial government or federal government stick to it? Stick to your guns kind of thing? Or
Absolutely. And I'm a former federal government worker as well.
All right. Okay, interesting.
And a union vice president on the league.
Okay. All right, Christine. Thank you.
So, okay.
Thank you for your call. Yep, thank you. Linda in Ottawa, you're on City News, Linda. Hi there.
Hi, Rob. I'm calling because I just wanted to say, at the beginning of this and the thick of it, our doctors and nurses were our heroes.
Yes.
And they still are today.
Sure.
They sacrificed and were terrified to be there at the front, yet they did.
Yes.
And they were living in trailers and tents because they didn't want to go home to their families because they didn't know what was going on with this. So to turn around and treat them like this now to threaten their jobs is disgusting, absolutely disgusting.
Okay.
After everything they've gone through.
Okay.
And the one thing, I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. I'm not. Personally, I haven't gotten it because I feel I'd rather go to a doctor that's not vaccinated versus one that is. Because even though you're vaccinated, you can still catch it. You can still spread it to others and not know it because you're not showing any symptoms.
Sure. But your chances, you understand, your chances of ending up in the hospital are much greater than someone like me who's fully vaccinated, Linda.
Yes and no. There are people that have been fully vaccinated.
No. I mean, the data is pretty conclusive on that.
So
if you're not
it's
vaccinated,
everyone's personal choice, though. Everyone acts like getting sick now is like the most horrible thing in the world.
You also have to take responsibility for your choices. There are consequences for choices that you make, Linda.
Consequences for what? For myself getting sick?
Consequences. You might end up getting sick. Sure.
But there are consequences for people that are vaccinated.
There are places you're not going to be allowed to go. Right,
but
Linda?
There are consequences for people that are vaccinated that do catch it still and are spreading it without even knowing they're spreading it.
Okay.
That's not okay either.
Do you not see? You and I are. I get it. You and I are not going to see eye to eye on this, and that's fine. That's fine. I view it as a civic responsibility to go and get vaccinated, and you don't share that opinion. That's fine. So what's the plan B then? What's the plan B then for the healthcare system?
Everybody can still catch it. Everybody can still spread it.
Okay, you're not really getting to the core of it here. All right. What are we going to do now? Okay, government has taken this hard line. No jab, no job. Oops, the healthcare system would fall apart if we had to suspend all the unvaccinated healthcare workers. Oops, the mess that's called OC Transpo would be an even bigger mess if we have to order all the unvaccinated OC Transpo workers to stay at home and don't come to work. So what are we going to do? Joanne, Orleans, thank you for waiting. Go ahead, Joanne.
Yeah, good morning. I personally think the vaccine mandate was wrong to begin with, and from many perspectives, and I also think vilifying the non-vaccinated has been despicable. I am fully vaccinated. I don't share the hesitations, but I just think it was a terrible approach. So you asked is there a plan B? So that was their plan B, the Quebec government. I'm proposing a plan C.
Okay.
I think we need to recalibrate the healthcare system. I think that, in fact, rather than threatening and laying off people, there should have been an extraordinary incentive program put together with a complete review of the pay package for nurses and for other healthcare workers and personal support workers who are outside the healthcare system. I don't think it's been done comprehensively. The government should have spent billions in that area and recruited from wherever they could or go into the learning institutions and make sure capacity was coming through. It won't happen in a year, it won't happen in 2, but in 4 or 5, we can at least look at that rather than introduce something like universal daycare. You look at Quebec healthcare system versus that, what a waste of money this is going to be. It should have been a focus on healthcare. The second thing is I do think employers are worried about liability. And so the federal government, rather than being a bully, and provincial governments all across the country should be legislating that a safe workplace does not include a mandatory vaccine, that under reasonable circumstances, the state cannot go in and tell people what they have to do with their bodies, that under reasonable circumstances, you will have a sanitation, perhaps, station when if you still want gel, you provide masks. but you don't hold.
Yeah, I think your whole line of reasonableness is certainly going to come up when the court challenges are working their way through the judicial system. Absolutely.
Well, good, because there is another way.
Oh, yeah, because that's one of the legal standards of any charter challenge is it reasonable what you're proposing here? Is it a reasonable infringement of somebody's charter right, for example? So, yeah.
Especially when there is another way. We experienced this at my daughter's wedding a couple of weeks ago. Those who were not vaccinated had to show proof within the last 48 hours, and a particular test, not just any test, but I'm sorry, I don't know how it differed from others. You didn't have COVID. Every 48 hours, there are teachers being tested, proving they don't have COVID. The irony of this is that it will be the unvaxxed protecting the vaccinated, because we vaccinated people like me don't know if they're sick or not, if they're carrying the virus or not. That's my understanding. I think we have created this frenzy, and I hold the doctors, that circle there that Ford listens to all the time, I hold them responsible as many others. This petrified state that people find themselves in. We've lost all reason. We are not balancing liberty. As a culture, as a society, we have always had to tolerate risk. We are not going to eliminate risk. But I don't think that the healthcare system has ever been properly funded. Shame on the federal government for not doing it.
Yeah. When the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming naked, Joanne. We know who's swimming naked now.
And it's not pretty.
No, it is not pretty. We'll be back. Final quarter, Talk Back Hour, coming up on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me. People don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, we had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this time, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what the grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that would bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box, and and do it.
On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
What should government do? Is it time to rethink mandatory vaccination policies? Do you want government to stick to the hard line? If you're not fully vaccinated, you're not coming back to work. I'm talking about what's happening with healthcare workers and transit workers. We've talked about public transit workers. There was the big climb down yesterday in the province of Quebec. And you know why they climbed down? You should read. Allison Haynes is a columnist that I read quite frequently. She writes for the Montreal Gazette. And this is this morning's column in the Montreal Gazette. Quote a little bit from it. Despite insisting until the bitter end that Quebec would not budge in enforcing the edict, Dubé backed down, the health minister. His body language telegraphed defeat, just as it mirrored the frustrations of the countless vaccinated doctors, nurses, orderlies, public health officials, lab technicians, patients, and ordinary Quebecers who had supported the government's tough stand against those who still refused to roll up their sleeves. Quebec's deputy health minister, this is the key part. This is why the Quebec government had to back down. Quebec's deputy health minister listed the dire consequences of going ahead and suspending all these workers. 600 acute care beds would be closed. 35 operating rooms would be shuttered. A third of public nursing homes would have to reduce their services, and so on and so forth. We've already seen maternity wards in emergency departments in some regions hitting pause because of staff shortages in recent weeks. Playing catch up with the backlog of postponed surgeries is hard enough when 80 of 470 operating theaters have already gone dark. We ain't seen nothing yet. That's in Allison Haynes' column this morning in the Gazette. And that's why they had to do the big climb down. Yes, we're suspending 15,000 healthcare workers. And we're closing 600 hospital beds and closing 35 operating rooms. And if it was OC Transpo, yes, we're letting go 500 OC Transpo workers and canceling 100 bus routes. Jennifer in Brockville, thank you for waiting. You're on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. It's crazy to think that all these people that are taking the suspension, how they're going to survive. How are they going to pay for their family? They're taking unpaid leave, and in the end, if they don't get their vaccination, then they don't have a job. Yeah. So the government's not going to do anything for them if they're off? How are they going to afford all this? And they've actually
I guess that's the hill that they've chosen to die on. And as I say, choices have consequences. Yeah. So
I 100% agree, but I work in the healthcare profession.
Right.
I do know I have friends that are willing. They're more afraid of the vaccine than the virus, and they're willing to give up government paying thousands of dollars a year. I just don't understand how they're going to do this. It's scary. It's scary to feel like all these people could be homeless because they don't have a job, and they're willing to do that. That's how scary it's come.
Right. You don't understand it. It puzzles me as well. But what do you want the government to do? The municipal government here in Ottawa, I don't know what the situation is in Brockville, but here in Ottawa, you have to be vaccinated. I believe the deadline is tomorrow, or you're out of a job. You'll be suspended without pay. You could be fired.
That's how it is. Yeah, that's I think where I'm professioned at is by the end of October 31st, if you don't have the double vaccine, then you're on, I think it's sort of like a 2-week unpaid leave, and at the end of that 2 weeks, from what I understand, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
Goodbye.
And we've seen reports, the Ford government has basically punted this down to, say, the individual hospitals. You come up with your own policy. And most of the hospitals have come up with their own policy, right? You must be vaccinated or you're out of a job, and this is the date. We see what happened in Quebec. We know the federal government has its own plans for these kinds of things. Do you want the government to stick to that?
Well, I think it's important, especially in the healthcare industry. Like if you're bedside with a patient and you're unvaccinated, you're for sure putting everybody at risk, including yourself. And I just don't see the end. Like if there's two things I learned in life was that you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, and now the third one is you don't talk about the vaccine because people have their mind made up.
Well, I'm breaking all of those rules.
Well, 100%. But you know what I mean? Like you can't convince somebody to get the vaccine. You just can't.
No,
you can't say it's.
No.
Well, they're giving up their jobs. Yeah. That's the scary part. They're willing to give up $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year because nope, I'm not getting that vaccine. I'm that afraid that you're going to get the shot and you're just going to collapse on the floor and that's it. You're dead. Like I don't understand. That's the scary part is that they're more afraid of that than the actual virus.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you, Rob.
Nice to hear from you. In Canada, Paul, good morning. You're on City News, Paul.
Good morning, Rob. Yes, I 100% believe that all healthcare workers have to be vaccinated, and I 100% believe the government has to have a firm line on that.
What if it means, though, you have to suspend, in the case of Quebec, 15,000 healthcare workers, half of them treat patients on a daily basis, and if you don't do that, in the Quebec case, 600 hospital beds have to close?
Well, that's just the consequences of these actions that still have to be taken now.
Right.
Because if you do not pursue this, you're talking about people who are in the science field not believing the science of vaccination, and we have a major problem. I'm absolutely sure there's going to be short-term pain on this thing, but the ramifications to step back are much grander and much more dire.
All right, Paul. Thank you for your call, sir. Greatly appreciated. And being firm in your opinion. Ian in Brockville, you're on City News, Ian.
Common sense is a flower that does not grow in every person's garden.
All right.
I mean, at the end of the day...
Are you like the poet laureate of Brockville this morning, or what?
You're vaccinated.
Yes,
I'm not
am.
just yet. I don't know much about fixing people. I kind of get paid to burn diesel for a living, but common sense tells me that if we don't fix the problem, like we had the problem in the hospitals originally for the lack of staffing. They are frontline heroes, our essential workers, however you want to reference them. Nothing even really needs to be said, Rob. We need them to keep going to work. If we can have a single man develop one of the world's most top-selling electric vehicles, if we can now take joyrides to space, you're telling me that with all the power on this planet, all the mental strength that we have, we can't figure out a way to coincide until this gets resolved. I don't want to be vaccinated just yet. You do. I'm not too picky with who works on me. You are. I'm not saying we got to build separate hospitals for everybody, but come on, people. It's wild. That's all I got for you, fella.
Okay, Ian. Yeah, I think you're more. Let's come up with a plan B then. This plan is not going anywhere. This plan of mandatory vaccination for this class of worker, healthcare workers, I think transit workers too, I think it's going to come out, it's unworkable. Because if you have to get rid of that many people, you're going to have a dysfunctional mess of a system on your hands. I think that's the way it's shaping up. Jeremy in Ottawa, you're on City News. Jeremy.
Hello?
Hi, Jeremy. Go ahead, sir.
Hey,
Hey.
Yeah, as we talked before, I think I made my point really. I don't agree with the forced vaccinations. I don't agree with it. I think that it is really taking away everyone's rights and freedoms in this country, and that realistically, by doing that, it's almost declaring war on the people of this country.
Yeah, I remember talking to you. You're a little too far out of the mainstream for me, Jeremy. Let's just part ways, okay? Alma in Perth, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
I have a couple of thoughts on the vaccination. I'm a retired registered nurse now here in Ontario.
Yes.
I had people coming through Emerge when I was helping to cover Emerge that would not be vaccinated for this and that.
Yes.
Now, I was one of the fortunate ones. I never came down with anything viral. But I did know there were staff that would be home 3 or 4 days or 2 weeks or whatever. And the Charter of Rights says we do have that privilege. If you decide not to get vaccinated, and this isn't going to happen because I know the Charter of Rights covers a lot, my thinking is that you, as an unvaccinated person, should be charged the day's fare, whether you're in 2 days, 7 days, whatever, at the hospital instead of my OHIP paying it. You and I, as taxpayers, are paying a lot of money on health care. And I feel, okay, you have the right not to be vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I'm working in a merge, let's say, and you come in. Even though I'm vaccinated, there is a possibility I could get it. So I'm just thinking, if you choose that route, not to be vaccinated, that's fine. That's your privilege. But if you end up in hospital at my expense or the taxpayer's expense,
I'm going to send you the bill.
I think you should get the bill. That's right. And I don't know what the bill is today over in any hospital. But so thank you for the time.
Well, I thank you. Thank you for and everything you do to keep that healthcare system going there. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you for all your calls and your passion on the topic, regardless of your point of view. We're back right after the 11 o'clock news. Valley View with Bruce McIntyre. He's with the Eganville Leader, and this is City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
CJET 101.1 FM in Smith Falls and the Valley. Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, October 14th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Not just transit users who are unhappy with Ottawa's LRT system, a former mayor weighing in on what could be done. Here's City News reporter Prushka Gopalkista.
Ottawa's former mayor Larry O'Brien says that people who depend on the public transit system in Ottawa hope that it will be reliable and trustworthy in the long run. O'Brien tells the Rob Snow Show that previous transit plans suggested that a train system would not work for the city of Ottawa, especially in the winter months.
It seems we're back in that position where it's not reliable. And it's not something that's faster, obviously. The billions of dollars we've spent has been kind of a waste unless we fix it.
He added that if a transit system does not prove to be reliable from the start, there could be many problems ahead. Pirishka Gopal-Kista, City News.
City News time 11:02. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Just a slight chance of a shower today and warm again. The high 21 will feel like 26. Some showers this evening, a steady rain overnight, 14 for the low. For today, the high warm, 21.
And right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 16 degrees. There are 417 new cases of COVID-19 in Ontario today, along with 3 more deaths. A concerning stat from the Eastern Ontario Health Unit, reporting more cases than Ottawa with 55. There are 29 cases today in Ottawa, 3 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 1 new case in Renfrew. The case numbers come from over 35,400 tests that were completed, the positive rate at 1.5%. We'll hear more from the federal government later today as Canadians still wait for more detail on the plan from the White House to reopen the border next month to fully vaccinated Canadians. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is set to hold a news conference today at the Canadian Embassy in Washington. It comes after she attended multiple finance meetings, but the attention will likely be on the border. Freeland stated yesterday talks were ongoing with the U.S. on what exact date the Biden administration plans to ease restrictions to let fully vaxxed Canadians cross land borders again after 19 months of being shut down. It's also not clear yet if the U.S. will recognize people vaccinated with mixed doses. That impacts roughly 4 million Canadians. When the border does reopen, Sarnia Mayor Mike Bradley thinks many will remain cautious.
I do not see a lot of people wanting to go over on day tripping for some time to come.
Fully vaccinated Americans have been allowed to visit Canada since August. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News time 11:04. A series of extortion incidents has led to charges in Ottawa. Police say a dating scam was luring men to the West End on the pretense of meeting a woman. Now, when the victim arrived at that location, they were intimidated and threatened to be exposed for communicating with an underage girl. 2 Ottawa men, 24-year-old Omar Ahmed and 23-year-old Abdu Obaida Moli Ali Misik, are facing several charges, including kidnapping and extortion. Police continue to search for 24-year-old Guled Jinji. Police do believe there are other victims and encourage those people to come forward. The OPP is using a rolling billboard, social media, and street canvas campaign trying to get information on the murder of 39-year-old Greg Slewage. It was September last year police were called to Scotch Corners Road in Beckwith, finding the body of Greg Slewage there, who had rented the property back in 2017. Investigators say a dark-colored sedan entered the property shortly before Greg was murdered. He sustained blunt force injuries. Now, there was no sign of forced entry at the location. Investigators believe the suspect may have been wearing construction-type work boots. There is a $50,000 reward for help for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Greg Slewage's killers. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Heave-hi-ho, the best man in Ottawa was Mufferaw Joe. Mufferaw Joe. Big Joe Mufferaw paddled into Mattawa all the way from Ottawa in just one day. Hey, hey, on the river Ottawa, the best man we ever saw was Big Joe Mufferaw, the old folks say. Come and listen and I'll tell you what the old folks say. And he say Big Joe had an old pet frog, bigger than a horse and he barked like a dog. And the only thing quicker than a train upon a track was Big Joe riding on the bullfrog's back. Heave-hi-ho, the best man in Ottawa was Mufferaw Joe. Mufferaw Joe.
All right, time for Valley View. Bruce McIntyre is back with us from the Eganville Leader. The paper is out this week, Renfrew County's largest independent circulation newspaper. Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning, Rob, on a Thursday, not a Wednesday.
That's okay. A day late, but as long as we're not $1 short, it doesn't really matter. The paper is $2 tax included, so it's the great deal. 120 years.
120 years.
20 years this year for the Eganville Leader. So
I think I made your producer, poor Dave, age 120 years the last 2 days. You really got to give him extra pay for dealing with me. God bless him.
Stress pay for Dave. Yeah, no, Bruce, you're always on the go. You're always somewhere. You're here, there, you're everywhere. You are your own Stomp and Tom song. You really are.
Thank you.
No, but we always appreciate it when you can give us the Valley View. What's the big story right now in the Ottawa Valley, Bruce?
The big story is from one of our smallest municipalities, BLR, Brudenell, Lindock, and Raglan. We have councillors that have been asked to resign. Really no choice left for them. This is for the councillors' second time they've been investigated by the Integrity Commissioner appointed by the province, and they have found that the two councillors overstepped their boundaries in a big way, abusive to staff, threatening staff, and it's a real mess because it's down near Palmer Rapids, and it's a quiet little township of about 1,600 people, and about doubles that come summertime, but it's a gong show. It really is. I'm quite shocked at what's going on down there. My boss, Gerald Tracy, says it's been going on for years. It's finally just coming out. But the two councillors basically have been abusive to staff. The Integrity Commissioner has been removed from all boards, and she's given them 10 days to resign their seats on council. If they don't want the councillors, Councillor Trevor Litkey is actually going to the Superior Court of Ontario for further charges relating from the investigation. So it'll be interesting. Not a lot of details have been given about what's involved with that court case, but no date has been set. But it actually, it's not good for Little Township. And the really sad thing about the whole thing, Rob, is it's a township, but their annual budget is maybe $3.1 million around there. It's going to cost more than $200,000 and climbing to deal with this investigation. So that's like 10%. It's going to be close to 10% of the total budget be spent on fees dealing with these two individuals. But that's a lot of roads, a lot of bridges, and a lot of work that can get done.
Yeah. I'm just reading through the story, and again, BLNR Township, Brudenell, Lindock, Raglan, it's called. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's the new NAW. That's the new NAW.
Okay. Palmer Rapids is basically the little
Palmer Rapids. Okay. All right. Yeah. I mean, words that you'll find in this story about the alleged conduct of these councillors. The whole council's 5 people.
Yes.
Right. So you're losing like half the city council has been asked to resign, basically. Right. Some of the descriptions and phrases throughout this news story from Gerald Tracy in the Eganville Leader this week: appalling behavior, disregard for ethics, egregious behavior, flagrant disregard, like phrases like these are some of the findings from the investigations into the behavior of these individuals. So.
And this is the second time the investigation has taken place. It's not like something out of left field. This is the second time there's a follow-up. So it's a pattern. It really is. And it's just demoralized the staff down there. I know the former clerk has actually left, and she's actually the clerk down in North Algona Wilberforce.
Oh, okay. All right.
But
okay.
They've really turned it around. Brand new council. They've really
But what did it take to get there, right? So, okay. Yeah. All right. We'll see what happens with that. Dateline Palmer Rapids. There you go. That's the big story in the Valley. All right.
They do more than just grow pot.
But as well, though, an uptick in COVID cases in Renfrew County, Bruce.
A little bit of a tick, and it's not Barry's Day this time. It's a lot of the, I think there are 8 cases, 8 or 12 were confirmed down in the Beachburg area, centered around one particular church. We can't name the church, unfortunately. We wouldn't name the church anyway, but that's where the bulk of the newest COVID cases are coming from. And still, over the last 18 months, we've had, 10 deaths, unfortunately, 817 total cases in all, which is not a lot, but for us, it's, every case is different and brings up some tragedy or some sadness with it. So hopefully those 8 new cases are looked after, get up back on their feet quickly, and all we can do is just hope.
I wanted to ask you, Bruce, here in Ottawa, we have the Ottawa Hospital and its various campuses, right? The Civic and the General and the Riverside and whatever, right? Yeah. For the hospitals in Renfrew County and District Health Unit, for example, how are they merged in any way? Do they have the same sort of administration Or like for the Barry's Bay Hospital has its own CEO and the Renfrew Hospital has its own CEO. Just how does that work in the Ottawa Valley, Bruce?
With the Valley, we have each of the major urban centers have their own hospital.
Right.
In the case of Barry's Bay, St. Francis is under the wing of Renfrew Victoria Hospital.
Okay.
They share the CEO, they share the finances, so it's almost, I don't know how it's a satellite hospital, but it's under the auspice of Renfrew. The other hospitals, Arnprior, Pembroke, Deep River, they have their own individual hospitals, their own board of directors, their own CEOs, so they have different, but the policy is the same throughout as far as bringing your proof of identification to the hospital if you want to get. For example, this morning I went to get some testing done at RVH, had to show my proof of vaccination, did the screening, and they're clamping down. They're now allowing visitors in, but they're being very strict about it.
Okay.
So that's Renfrew Hospital. Pembroke has a very strict mandate as well. So each hospital is different, but it's basically geared towards proof of vaccination.
Right. And Premier Ford, I'm wondering, for the mandatory vaccination for employees, Premier Ford has basically said, well, the hospitals can come up with their own policies. What's going on in the Valley with that?
Hasn't really been an issue at RVH.
Okay.
Pembroke, they are instituting the strict mandatory vaccination. If you're not vaccinated, you don't come to work, and they are making exceptions with the rapid testing 2 to 3 times a week. But basically, it's like you were saying earlier on your talk in your callback: no jab, no job. They're not fired, but they're suspended without pay.
Really? Okay. All right.
So that keeps them busy. And
I found it interesting, though, and something that we've talked about in the past. There was a big letter in the to the editor, not a letter to the editor, but a column in the Ottawa Citizen last week, in the opinion page of the Ottawa Citizen last week, advocating for ample parking at the new Civics site whenever that comes into being, the new Civic campus for the Ottawa Hospital. It was signed by all the chiefs of staff of the Ottawa Valley hospitals.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that. So there you go.
Yeah.
I know.
And the point being that, Bruce, if Bruce needs to go to the Civic, well, he's not going to the park and ride in Canada, and he's not driving from Renfrew to Canada, getting on the park and ride and taking public transit to get to the Civic, right?
No.
Bruce is going to drive to the Civic and park at the Civic.
If I can get a spot.
Right, if you could afford it too, I guess, right? So
it's funny. Renfrew RVH brought in paid parking about 8 years ago, and that was a big shock to the community. Prior to that, it was free, and it had the initial backlash. But I mean, it's like everywhere else, right? You need the funding, and you have to get it somehow. But the parking is very reasonable. The most you'll spend, I think, is $4 for the day. I believe that's the total. An hour is $1. It's very reasonable. It's not outrageous, and they do make concessions for people that can't afford it as well. They do have programs in place for those individuals.
Okay.
So it's hopefully I don't have to go to the hospital too much more. I'm pretty happy about staying away from there.
Yeah, good for you, Bruce.
And we had our second annual bike ride for hospice. My boss and our MPP and Minister, actually Parliamentary Secretary, the Premier, John Yakubuski, got on their bikes.
Yep. And
they raised a lot of money for hospice again, because it is the only hospice in all of Renfrew County, and it serves all the residents. And unfortunately, 52% of their funding comes from the pockets of the people of Renfrew County. The other 48% are paid for by the province. That's just to keep the doors open. That's nothing else. That's just lights, hydro, and bedding. So the hospice had a pretty tough time trying to raise money with COVID, especially. They lost 2 of their biggest fundraisers. The Hike for Hospice usually brings about $150,000, and usually their annual goal is $600,000. That's a lot to ask for a little community, but they do it somehow every year.
Okay, I'm just looking through your WAD ads. Not that I'm looking for a new job, but you know me.
I was telling my boss that. I said, of all the things that Mr. Snow loves, he loves our ads.
No, I just see there's lots of jobs. Good jobs. Renfrew County Catholic District School Board, casual caretakers, all locations. Doesn't have the wage here. And it doesn't have a description of the job, but casual caretakers at the school board. Always good to get your foot in at the school board, though.
Someone I know does that. They clean, and they go from school to school, and they do it at nighttime, and I guess that's considered casual. So
Right, okay. County of Renfrew food service worker, part-time. $26.15 an hour to start.
I can cook.
$26.15 to start, okay?
That'll be
grade 12 equivalent combination of education and experience and a food safety worker program certificate is what you need.
That's a new program, actually new requirement province brought in about 6-8 years ago.
Right.
And to work in a long-term care home, you have to have that certificate. So it's
that's probably what it is. Probably a long-term care job.
The county operates two homes: the Bourne Manor in Renfrew and the Miramichi Lodge in Pembroke.
Yeah, and then there's this one, town of Admaston Bromley, township Admaston Bromley. Is that how you say it? Admaston Bromley.
Next door to Renfrew. That's where all our Mennonites live.
Oh, that's where the Mennonites are. Okay, all right. Okay, interesting. Temporary, but full-time machine operator, potential for full-time. Potential lead to full-time. Starting salary is $38,493 a year, up to $48,700 a year, plus benefits. So that's a pretty good job too. So
for Renfrew County, that'd be the equivalent of working in Ottawa about $70,000-$80,000 a year.
Yeah, so some good jobs. Look them up in the this week's edition and Eganville Leader. Geez,
I should mention, Rob, with your LRT problems you have down there, I think we should send some of our Douglas LRT people down and help you out. Our Mennonites, they never break down. Winter, spring, summer, fall, the Mennonite Express is always going.
Well, I'll tell you what, it'd be more reliable than an Alstom train right about now. That's for darn sure. All right, Bruce, we got to run. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Next week, buddy. Yeah, you too. Bruce McIntyre, Valley View, Eganville Leader. Coming up next, opening night for the Ottawa Senators. On Sportsnet tonight, they'll help us get ready. Coming up, this is City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names, the colors are fun, the logo is fun, and it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives, it's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is of course everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well, occasionally. We also have our pamper items. So your pamper items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. 2 other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes. They're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
Sunday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 1024 McGarry Terrace.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News. 101.1 FM.
and 1310 a.m.
Still ahead on our program, it's The World with Elliot Tepper, Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University, where he is Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Norman Patterson School of International Affairs. And we're going to cover off a lot of ground today. We're gonna, around the world we go. The election is over here in Canada, and you would think eventually the new Liberal minority government is going to take shape. So what are going to be some of the top foreign policy priorities for the latest incarnation of the Trudeau government? A number of things would come to mind. We had news on the U.S. border reopening to Canadians. But what about getting that border fully reopened, the Canada-U.S. border, so critical? There's this global tax agreement, 15% minimum corporate tax. 130 some odd countries are signing on to that agreement. What's behind that? Why is Canada involved with it? What could become of that? We have kind of two things going on. We have record high gasoline prices still around the corner here, $142.9 for gas, highest ever price in the city of Ottawa. You have the ongoing dispute about the Line 5 pipeline with the state of Michigan, and you contrast all that against the COP26 climate conference coming up in Glasgow, Scotland at the end of the month. So you have energy crisis versus the climate crisis. And if you're the Trudeau government, how are you going to handle that? So we're going to cover off all of that and a whole lot more when Professor Elliot Tepper joins us. That's coming up right after the 11:30 news. Now, in the meantime, let's get a quick preview tonight. Battle of Ontario. It's the home opener for the Ottawa Senators against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And to help us do that, it's 7 o'clock tonight, by the way. And the television broadcast is on Sportsnet. And to help us out with and get us ready for the game is Justin Bourne, NHL analyst, Sportsnet, co-host of Real Kyper and Bourne on Sportsnet Radio Fan 590. There we go. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks, man. Excited about the hockey season being back.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great feeling. It's a great buzz. It's a long time coming. But for Sens fans, Justin, it's just not complete because Sens fans, they're missing a key player, the Ottawa Senators. Brady Tkachuk not in the lineup tonight. What do you think of that, the fact that he's not there?
Well, I think it's pretty substantial. It's one of those things where Ottawa kind of has to decide what it is they're trying to do this season. Is it another year where they're okay with being not very good and, trying to get another high draft pick, sort of pushing this rebuild another year down the road and trying to grab another key piece? Or do they want to start turning the ship around and start winning some hockey games? Because Brady Tkachuk's going to be a big part of that if they want to win hockey games. So it's kind of a statement to me about where they want to go. Are they willing to give this guy what he wants to get him in the lineup so they can hope to make a push and threaten playoffs this season? Or again, is it going to be another year where they're just trying to build for the future? Okay. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, they had the dramatic and upsetting loss in the playoffs, right? Montreal. It was Game 7. Went 7 games, if I recall, right? Yes, sir.
Huge upset. What are the expectations for the Leafs this season? High expectations again?
Well, it depends who you ask.
Okay.
Yeah, the expectations internally are, nothing less than winning some playoff rounds will do. I would say a lot of the fan base, their expectations have changed. They felt like the team they had last year was as good as any team they've had, and felt like they were in a soft division, and they expected a Stanley Cup or at least a push for one last year. So I think fans' expectations are actually lowered because I think they see a team that is not as good maybe as it was the year before. But again, the people inside the organization know that it's time to win some playoff hockey games, or this whole thing is going to be deemed as a failure. So it's kind of put up or shut up time. They got to perform.
All right. We're just learning now by way of Twitter from the local sports media. It's Anton Forsberg in the net tonight for Ottawa. Who is in goal for Toronto, Justin?
Peter Mrazek will be the guy tonight. Last night, Jack Campbell played against the Montreal Canadiens and put up, let in one goal on over 30 shots. So great performance. They intend to have a tandem here in Toronto, so Mrazek will get his chance to prove he's a worthy dueling partner for Jack Campbell.
Excellent. Enjoy the game.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Justin Bourne, Sportsnet Radio fan, 590 NHL analyst for Sportsnet. 7 o'clock face-off tonight. This is City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
This is Thursday, the 14th of October. Good morning. I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, cloudy and humid, 17 degrees, 17 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. A former Ottawa mayor is chiming in on the O-Train troubles. Larry O'Brien calling the O-Train system a complete disaster. Until it's fixed, O'Brien says it's been a waste of money. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson apologizing to Councillor Diane Deans after her mic was cut off mid-sentence during yesterday's council debate over who should investigate the LRT procurement. Watson said yesterday the associate clerk cut off Deans' mic, but this morning he tweeted that he has apologized to Deans. It was the wrong call, he says, and that he takes full responsibility. Multiple extortion charges laid in Ottawa in connection with a bizarre dating scam. Each of the victims arrived to the spot where he was supposed to meet a woman and was then intimidated and threatened to be exposed as communicating with an underage girl unless he paid up. 2 Ottawa men have been charged. Police are searching for a third, and officers encourage any other victims to come forward. There's word that dining rooms and workout classes in Ontario could soon be full once again. An announcement about capacity limits in Ontario is expected tomorrow, after last week's lifting of capacity limits for sports arenas and other large venues. City News Time, 11:31. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's called The World. It's our global view. with Professor Elliot Tepper, Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton University. And once again, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you again. The Canadian election is over. The new Liberal minority government will soon take shape. When it comes to the top foreign policy priorities for Canada, what are they, Professor, in your opinion?
Well, the first two always are the security and prosperity of Canadians. And that's, if you take a look at the Liberal platform, which doesn't have a whole lot on foreign affairs, that's where they start. They want to strengthen the international order. The rules-based international order is the number one priority because a country like Canada requires, we're a middle power and we're a trading nation, and we want to play a role for security and prosperity in the world. So strengthening the international order is one of the top priorities. If you put together two or three or four bits or pieces of the Liberal platform, there's also a lot of concern about security. They're going to strengthen NORAD. They're going to put more money into our security and intelligence agencies. This is all buried away in the platform. But essentially, you want to strengthen your capacity to act abroad and to have a more secure environment at home. Huawei is indirectly mentioned, by the way. You can count on that, I think, coming up very, very soon for a decision. But the other elements, there's some little bits and pieces in there. The broad view is it's going to be a feminist foreign policy. I don't imagine they will change that. So we're going to be on the right side of history in a lot of the issues as the Liberals see it.
Okay. In more practical or pragmatic terms, there would seem to be some hot button issues that have to be settled. For example, we had the news this week that the Americans are going to open the border for Canadian travelers. Details to come. But that's crucial, right, to get that border reopened, right?
Yes. One of the priorities within their platform, and it's an eternal anyway, is not only strengthen multilateral capacity, but to deal with the bilateral issues that arise. And that, of course, primarily means with our number one trading and security and neighborly country to the south. So I thought it was very interesting, Rob, that Canada, for the very first time, acted separately from the U.S. on the border issue just before the Canadian election. Maybe, Rob, it was to add a little extra juice to the economy just before the election, but we do need harmonization. The two countries are, as Joe Biden said when he was here, we're family. There's no way to conduct Canada's relations in any way without it doing so in concert with, despite the issues, dealing with the U.S.
Right. What do you think about this agreement? I mean, it involves 130 countries, Canada among them, on a 15% minimum corporate tax rate. Ending the so-called race to the bottom is how some people describe it.
I think it's very interesting. Tucked away in the Liberal platform also is something about creating an international court to deal with corruption. Well, that's an innovation. I think that would be interesting, but it does relate precisely to the whole question of, we've got the Pandora Papers now about how do you keep states from, as you say, a race to the bottom, and I'm calling this the Yellen tax. The U.S. Secretary Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, she's put her muscle behind this successfully. So there's now pretty broad agreement. We'll have to see if it's actually implemented. The U.S. Senate's involved in this, but the whole idea here is that you can't race around the globe in order to hide your money and just play off one state against another. That at a minimum, states have to pay 15%. Multinationals have to pay 15% in their primary place they are and where they make their money. But after that, you get into tax policy, which gets a lot more complex. But the key issue here is that the world needs to get together to do something about a very major issue, multinationals escaping their national boundaries and everybody losing as a result. I think it's a big step forward. It's not quite realize, but this originated in the Biden tax plan for America. In order for him to rejuvenate America, which is what he's really up to, the New Deal, he has to raise money. In order to raise money, he wants to tax corporations. He can't tax corporations, Rob, if they just go away. So Janet Yellen said, I'm not going to let you go away. And she's got agreement now. I shouldn't say just she, but the world has now agreed that it's a really bad idea to let countries just be played off against each other. So it's a very interesting step. The implementation, however, remains to be seen.
Okay. It is interesting because at the end of the month, it will be the COP conference in Glasgow, COP 26, another big international climate change conference. I recall conversations that you had with my predecessor, Mark Sutcliffe, going back, about a year ago, where all of the talk was about so much talk at the time about the thickening of borders, and would that be the future? And are we in an age where these multilateral agreements or institutions are their best days are behind them? But you talk about a global tax agreement or COP 26. It seems as though multilateralism is alive and well, Professor.
Well, Canada will do its best to pump up multilateralism because we're good at it and we depend on it.
Right.
And of course, in the Canadian priorities for the foreign policy, which is yet to be announced, there will be a heavy emphasis on climate. Canada will play a very active role there. And I think it's also becoming less and less viable to deny the climate is a global existential crisis for the globe. Every state, thin borders or fat borders. Okay. If you've got fires and flood and sea levels rising and all the visible evidence that the climate is changing, and now we have a kind of another opportunity to actually do something about it at COP 26. And I think Canada will do its part to be sure that's very prominent in the global attention. Do something about climate before climate does something to us.
Are you expecting any kind of change at Foreign Affairs or Global Affairs? Minister Garneau is there, fairly new to the portfolio after the most recent shuffle that moved Chrystia Freeland out of Foreign Affairs and into finance. Are you anticipating, say, a new Minister of Foreign Affairs, Professor?
Well, you picked a good day to ask about our astronaut.
Right. Yeah. Yes. True enough. Yeah.
Canadians in space.
That's right.
That
Yeah.
theme. The Rubik's Cube of putting together a cabinet is underway. Who knows how it's going to work out? The government is pledging still to have 50% gender parity. How that twists and turns in terms of who gets what. Mark Garneau was quite well prepared for that job. He had spent a lot of time doing, among other things, he has seen the world from above. He knows what COP 26 is about, but also his previous work in Parliament. But no, I have no predictions on that. The twist in terms of the Rubik's Cube is in the hands now of the innermost circles of the Trudeau cabinet making process.
Okay. I'm not sure if this really qualifies as foreign affairs, but it's certainly, we're paying the most for gasoline we've ever paid in the city of Ottawa.
Yeah, that's a shock, isn't
right,
it?
at $1.42. And the experts, I've had some on the program who follow such things, say if that Line 5 pipeline shuts down, which is under the Straits of Mackinac, a few kilometers of pipe under the Straits of Mackinac that Canada doesn't control, it's controlled by the government in Michigan. $1.42 a liter is going to look like a bargain. And they have told me worst case scenario, it's not going to be a question of how much gas costs, it's going to be whether you can get gasoline. I mean, dire stuff. We've seen Canada invoke this treaty from 1977
for the first time.
This is a very important issue that has to be settled here, isn't it?
On the one hand, we're talking about COP26 and climate, and why are we still talking about, boy, do we need more of this fossil fuel stuff? So we're caught in between the past and the future on this. In terms of Straits of Mackinac, you don't really want to have a gas leak there, and the environmental concerns are real, but also Gretchen Whitmer, the current governor of Michigan, campaigned on doing something about closing off Line 5. So it's a campaign promise, and the current energy secretary is the former governor of Michigan. So we'll have to see how that one works out. Line 5 is, I'm tempted to say, because we're talking about other things today, that pipeline politics in the age when we're supposed to be getting off fossil fuels remains fascinating. If we really are getting off fossil fuels, why are we so concerned about this? Well, we're still concerned because the future hasn't arrived. We are caught between trying to get there and also natural gas. Natural gas is a bridge, they say, if you've talked to your experts, a bridge commodity of fuel to get us there. I'm fascinated by pipeline politics. If we haven't talked about Afghanistan, but beneath a lot of what's going on there is pipeline politics, and we possibly will get to Mr. Putin in Europe.
Well, let's go there right now.
Sure, instead of Line 5, we can talk about Nord Stream 2.
Yeah, because President Putin yesterday, Russian President Vladimir Putin, was at a conference that's put on annually by the financial news network CNBC, and he has been accused of using energy supplies in Russia, supplies to Europe, using them as a weapon, that he uses Russian energy as a weapon. He denies that, and that given the current energy crunch facing Europe, he basically said, I'm here to help. Russia will do whatever it can to help. But can he be believed, Professor?
Well, a few things. First of all, Russia has been called by a wag in the press, a journalist, as a gas station masquerading as a country. They do not. So he's saying we're here to help, but this is how they make their money. The economy under Putin has not diversified, modernized, changed, altered. They still rely very heavily on being among the world's largest exporter of fossil fuels. The other point is that Europe still relies heavily on them, leaning on Europe to cancel, as Donald Trump has done, and Biden, I think, is pressing, cancel Nord Stream 2. You're saying turn off the lights in the winter, turn off the heat in the winter. So we are in a situation where, and incidentally, on Nord Stream 2, the whole idea of that pipeline was to bypass going through Ukraine because of the issues over Russia and Ukraine and the imperialism of, let's recreate the Soviet Empire and the Russian Empire. All of that gets all tangled together. What we do have immediately in Europe is a situation where energy is needed. Russia is offering it, and there's every good reason to think they're manipulating that to their advantage.
When we come back from Russia to the two other great powers, the United States and China, and an upcoming virtual summit. We'll be right back. It's The World with Professor Elliot Tepper, and this is City News.
It was devastating, and it's devastating to all small business, but not knowing where it was going to go. But then the renovation market, as people stayed home, took off like wildfire. And for us, yes, we're very lucky, very fortunate that we were able to turn things around. I think a lot of it had to do with our internet presence as well, that I was, kept working on over years, and then it kind of took off. So that was very positive. But now, no, people are staying at home. We're renovating different markets, whether it's a kitchen or a backyard or your fireplace. They want to cozy things up. So yes, things are extremely busy right now. Right now it's fireplaces, and I think with the snowbirds, a lot of those clients have existing wood fireplaces, so they're looking at inserts. So they want to convert the wood to gas. They don't want to deal with the wood part of it, but they want it clean and easy and efficient, and that's been a major, major increase in our business. The cottage and chalet market has really increased, absolutely. We see that people, that's their staycation now, is either the backyard or their cottage with their close bubble of family. So there's no question that we've seen a big increase in that area as well. I've seen a change in the backyard because now the staycation, from my past being in the pool business, one of our great clients was in the other day, and he's in the pool business. He's booking for 2022 for in-ground pools, okay? So I think what's happened now is that's brought everybody back home, and I think maybe down the road, maybe 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're still going to see people spending time in their backyards and staying home more. The barbecue area, really, we call it the backyard. So you walk out of your house into a backyard, and it kind of looks like that with the fencing and the sky and things like that. So that is just our fun room. It's just, there's a lot of cool gadgets there that has to do with dealing with charcoal and wood pellet barbecues. To go online, you're going to find, you just Google, romantic fireplaces will come up. The one nice thing about our work is that the Google reviews and the Google pictures are phenomenal. We're uploading stuff every day. I have at least 1,000 jobs, real jobs that you can take a look at, either on the Google pictures on the drive, or if you go to our website at romanticfireplaces.com and click on our work, it's where we used to load lots of them up, but there's lots of pictures there too. But the great thing about that is they're real. There's testimonials there about people talking about our team. And our team here is unique to everybody else. It's two small teams, but these fellas work for me. They're our guys. So when they go into your home, they care as much about your house as you do.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Back with part 2 of The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. The United States and China have an agreement in principle that would see a virtual summit with Presidents Xi and Biden quite likely before the end of the year. What are the priorities for the two powers, Professor?
The priority is to try to put their relationship on a more calm footing. This is a let's lower the risk summit, as near as I can tell. They keep in mind a few things. One is that these two leaders really know each other pretty well. They met when they were both vice presidents, as the media calls it. It's not quite true, but they met before. They've had a way to take a measure of each other before they came to power, complete power. So they do know each other. The second thing to keep in mind is that the first meeting under the Biden administration with the Chinese was in March in Alaska, and it was awful in terms of how this relationship was then moving. The Chinese were very truculent and said, here's our list of demands, and you have to shape up, and it was very, very frosty. Then the two leaders have, in fact, been talking on the phone at least twice that we know of, so it's not like this is a brand new thing. And also, this meeting is not going to be in person 1 year into the Biden administration, approximately. They are going to meet virtually. But that may be Xi Jinping's choice, Rob, because he doesn't seem to want to travel anymore. And there's a big mystery as to, is it because of he's worried about the Delta variant? Is he worried about his health? Or maybe he doesn't want to leave home? And leaders who are worried about looking over their shoulder. All we do know is that Xi Jinping is feeling very, very confident right now. He's acting in a variety of ways, including in Taiwan, which is raising international tensions, and Taiwan certainly will be a primary subject of that conversation.
Well, he certainly seems to, based on the headlines and the news stories that I have read, he seems to be ratcheting up the rhetoric on Taiwan.
Yes, it's more than rhetoric.
More than rhetoric, okay. All right.
The rhetoric is, oh yeah, we still believe in peace, but it's going to happen, essentially. We want peaceful unification.
We're taking it back, right?
Pardon?
We're taking it back.
It's returning to the motherland.
Returning to the motherland. Okay.
His whole approach is that what he's up to now is the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, the great rejuvenation after the humiliation of the European imperialist era, and he's saying we're now back. In March when they first met, the main message there is we are not speaking from an inferior position here. You are. It's the West that's now in an inferior position, and we are in a superior position, basically. So yes, I'm very concerned, and I think we all should be concerned about the fate of Taiwan. It's a democratic ally, and when we talk about Canadian foreign policy, what's it going to do regarding Taiwan, as well as more broadly about China? The Chinese National Rejuvenation Project under Xi Jinping says that, Hong Kong's now been regulated, taken over. We've had no problems from, no big pushback on that. What about Tibet? No big pushback on that. So there's real concern that democratic Taiwan is on the to-do list for Xi Jinping. And now, what's the world going to do? We cannot let this happen, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's going to be a big part of the conversation between the two states. But also, there's lots of trade issues. There's essentially, we're going to disagree with each other. Can we find a way to do it while lowering the temperature? I think that's probably the subject matter of this dialogue. One thing that's not going to be on the phone call, Rob, are the two Michaels.
Right.
Or not the virtual meeting. Sorry. The one of the two phone calls apparently. Joe Biden said, "Hey, we want the two Michaels home," according to public reports. So that one's off the agenda at least, and we're pleased about that.
Okay, finally, this week there was an election in the Czech Republic.
Yes,
and a billionaire, quote-unquote, strongman lost. He lost the election. He is out. I don't know how to say his name. I believe it's Andrej Babiš, but I stand to be corrected.
Babiš, but yeah.
What do you think about what happened? Because it's being called a dramatic outcome.
Well, it is, because this is, in the broader context, we can talk about it, of course, in the local context. It matters to the people of the state involved. But what about this populist tide and the authoritarian tide in the broader contest? And as we're just talking about Taiwan, the broader contest between the democracies and autocracies of the world. We had inside the EU, several states that, in the case of Hungary's Orban, call themselves illiberal democracies. And the Czech Republic was an ally in that regard with this rather interesting character, another oligarch sort, who owns media, who then comes to power. He's got a lot of money, apparently. His name showed up in the Pandora Papers just before the election. So what to make of this now is that it looks as if what I was calling, over many discussions on the rise of populism, there's been a pushback. There was a pushback all across Russia. We know that Russia clamped down hard on it. There's been a pushback against autocracy. We see it in Burma. We see it here, that what's happened, and this is what's going to happen next with populism, what's happened here is that there was a coalition of parties who don't really agree with each other on much, who are saying we have to save our Czech Republic, and we don't want a strong man to emerge because we've seen what's happened in Hungary. Our guy is moving in the same direction as Hungary. In fact, Orban was brought in to campaign with him. We aren't going to have that, and they now have 108 seats out of 200, so it's a pretty clear majority for them, and at least one strong man seems to be down. What's that mean for the others? I think they should be nervous.
You think they should be nervous?
The model of everybody getting together, even if we don't agree with each other, in order to save democracy in our country, this is already starting to happen in Hungary. The parties in Hungary, where the process was farther along, apparently in controlling the opposition and moving the direction of authoritarianism, is farther along there. But the parties there are starting to, in advance of the election next year, are already starting to band together, saying we have to save our democracies. Also, incidentally, Viktor Orban in Hungary has memories of the past. These are blood and soil parties. traditional blood and soil European parties. We remember Hungary's greatness. Well, that includes Slovakia, which was once called, Northern Hungary or some such. So there's a lot of politics you better be careful with when you're dealing with emerging strongmen. But no, I think this is an interesting, in the broad perspective, has the populist tide now been blunted? And it looks like it has in this one case and perhaps another one coming.
Thank you again for your analysis this week, Professor Tepper. It's always great.
Oh, nice to talk to you, Rob.
The World with Professor Elliot Tepper from Carleton University. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.